That's dope.
So guys, as you know, today I have yet another guest, and Simon's been here quite a few times of late, giving us very valuable updates onto what's happening, obviously, with CeFi and all these centralized platforms and what we can likely see in the future. And now we're sort of starting to see a little more news also rolled out surrounding Celsius specifically. So I'm going to bring him on to discuss as well. Simon, it seems you're on the road show right now, man. Every time I turn on Twitter, I see your Twitter. It's like in a Spaces or on a stream or something. It seems like this has become a 24/7, 365 thing.
Yeah, Celsius has quite frankly taken over my life of recent. So you don't choose the cards you're dealt with, but it's the one I've been dealt with for some reason.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And there's all this news, as I said. So obviously, maybe you can just give us context, the very brief as to where the situation lies right now, and then we can go into the specifics.
Yeah, sure. So, the crypto lending market is very distressed right now. We've had our Lehman Brothers of crypto moment. And two of the companies that were really affected were Celsius and Voyager. They suspended withdrawals, and now they're in Chapter 11 bankruptcy with the same law firm, which is creating a very interesting scenario where we get to implement some of the financial innovation solutions that we've used in the past to recover markets, and if successful, have triggered off bull markets in the past. So the current situation is that FTX is going around and really bailing out companies, lending them using the JP Morgan strategy of 1907, where they essentially provide liquidity. Because the interesting thing is they have a lot of exposure to these companies as well. So they're using their exposure as liquidity to try and wipe out their bad loans as well. So it's not actually cash deals that are being transacted. There's a lot of debt swaps and interesting financial engineering that's happening on the FTX side. Because you've got to remember, FTX is a highly leveraged futures exchange created by a billionaire that made money through trading. And so it has a culture of those types of things. And so FTX is leveraging engineering right now. It lent some money to BlockFi, and it acquired a $4 billion company for up to 25 to 125 million. It then also tried to do the same with Voyager. So because certain people want haircutted liquidity, i.e. they'd like their coins back, some of them back, essentially FTX has gone in and said, don't bring it out to auction. Don't do it in the competitive market. We'll come up with a quick solution, and you sign off on that. And that allows us to essentially roll up all of those customers into BlockFi and FTX. And that was rejected by the committee and Voyager as somewhat of an opportunistic thing. And they said, instead, we'll go to auction. So that's what's happening.
I discussed that at length yesterday, but obviously, I mean, that's a play, and I don't blame them, by SBF to basically liquidate Voyager's assets and onboard all of their customers, right? There's no real, that's the end of Voyager if they accept a deal like that. So there's no surprise that they would go, I think, to auction. What's interesting is that you talk about, I mean, there's news here. I've got it right here. I can pull it up, actually, that FTX is likely to buy Bithumb, right, in South Korea. So it's not even just CeFi right now. We're talking, they bought Liquid, obviously, in Japan not so long ago. A lot of people speculated they would outright buy Voyager, but that clearly has not been happening with the liquidity proposal that you discussed. They basically bought BlockFi, but they haven't made any move seemingly towards Celsius, right? So why do you think that Celsius is the one that's so hands-off for them? Is the situation that much worse, or is it something else?
Yeah, so I've kind of deconstructed this whole thing into three plays. It's leadership, it's risk, and it's regulations. So BlockFi settled 100 million with the SEC and fast-tracked their securities licensing process. With crypto lending, you can split the service in two. You've got receiving yield, which is a security. And so those that were offering yield were unlicensed securities businesses. And you've got the other side, which is issuing loans. And so that requires a lending license, which BlockFi did have, that Celsius didn't have. Also, if you've got a hole in your balance sheet, then you're an unlicensed bank because you're engaging in fractional reserve banking if you can't back it up. And so those are kind of the regulatory side. With Celsius, it had leadership that led to complete misrepresentations and a culture of not having compliance from the top. It also had risk management models whereby it went further and further down the risk curve and did not disclose those. So that then led to the issues where, it's essentially currently got $4.7 billion of assets that it says on its balance sheet and 1.7 billion of assets. So that's a $3 billion hole that it's plugging through other assets like mining companies and
which is not
custodians and various other things and tokens that questionably are worthless. And so, it's a really, really big hole that needs to be filled. Now, couple that with the leadership style. Alex Majinsky made a lot of enemies with a lot of people because his style was promising the world that you could have low fees, or in fact, no fees, safety, low risk, instant withdrawals, guaranteed returns, and a superior balance sheet, which essentially consisted of Cell token that everyone levered up many times over. And so by making all of those promises, he made enemies with all of the people that could bail him out by slagging off their business model for charging fees. And so therefore, there's a lot of different crypto politics going on behind the scenes that is leading to alliances being formed, which unfortunately, on the other side of that, is very innocent people's life savings that were misrepresented into these things. So what we're trying to do on the other side of that is put aside the crypto politics and just get back to first principles, which is, accepting that a lot of people have been misrepresented. What can we do in order to recover the situation? And how can we bring everyone along with us in any upside rather than just one company having the entire upside?
Right. I mean, which makes sense. But the short answer then to what I asked is Celsius didn't really have any of the positive attributes that someone like an FTX would be looking for in this scenario. They had a leader that was obviously lying or disingenuous. They have a much bigger hole in the balance sheet, and they didn't have any of the proper licensing, right? So BlockFi was a much easier deal, presumably for FTX to make because they could legally lend, right? And they had the brand name in the United States. And so bottom line, it seems like nobody's coming, at least from the big names that are looking at these others for Celsius.
Yeah, so, BlockFi had half the licensing and a settlement with the SEC to get the other half. It made some bad risks, just like Voyager did. 58% of it was exposed to, a bunch of hedge fund managers that were going out and buying yachts. And essentially retail were over-collateralized, while the hedge funds that were making all the big bets and committing fraud were under-collateralized. But Celsius had it all. It had the license issue, the leadership issue, and the risk issue.
So it's going to be a long time until this is resolved for them. I mean, Voyager, it seems like at least the auction will happen at the end of August. There'll probably be some clarity, within 4 to 6 weeks as to what's happening there. Obviously, the FTX thing was outright rejected. But it seems like it'd be really hard to give a timeline for people. I mean, literally, I see it in the comments. People are like, am I getting 25% of my money back, 50%, 75%, and when? And there's no answers.
Well, there are a few answers to that. So the issues that are coming up now, this is the latest news in the latest releases, is that so Celsius have applied in order. No committees formed, by the way, yet. I'm sure they've just had hundreds of thousands of people apply for the committee. But they've applied to have permission to sell Bitcoin, which means that they want to turn their unprofitable Bitcoin mining business to cover some of those costs. So they've asked for permission to sell some of those Bitcoin. They've also asked for permission to run an auction for their custody business that they acquired, GK8. So that's trying to plug a bit of a hole. And they've given hints about this crypto long strategy. There's a lot of legal precedent that needs to be set here. Firstly, the differential between funds that they claimed were in custody but were commingled with ones that were invested, that needs to settle itself. There's another legal issue around essentially crypto long. When you're $3 billion crypto short, if the price of Bitcoin goes up and we enter into a bull market, then they're short, and that could send them bankrupt. So they have to lock in the dollar value of their debt. And if they don't lock in the dollar value, which gives people like me that have Bitcoins on there a big haircut, then they've got to figure out how to make the Bitcoins back. And if they're not there, how are they going to do that? So,
well, that's one of the news. There's actually, this is interesting and something I wanted to ask you about. What happens to Celsius creditors if crypto prices recover, right? I mean, the same question is there for Voyager. I own Ethereum and Bitcoin on Voyager. People think that a bull market would be good, but it's only good in dollar terms, right? That doesn't recover any more of your Bitcoin or your Ethereum if those are the assets that you're looking to get paid back in.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two ways of looking at this. You either take the dollar value of all of the debt and try and lock it in which case then a crypto bull market, if you're trying to repay that, would end up with you less crypto, but a potential of repaying the dollar debt. But at the moment, they're crypto short, which means that the bull market would crucify them and put them deeper and deeper into a much, much bigger debt that completely wipe out all chance of any funds being repaid. So the decisions that are made are extremely time sensitive and have big implications.
That's so shitty, because that means that basically the people making these decisions are having to behave as traders with all of our capital at risk, right? They're making trading decisions as to when to enter or exit a market and with what assets and how they're going to pay us back. That is not a situation I'm comfortable being in personally.
Exactly. And then you've got the regulatory issue, which is an unlicensed hedge fund, which can only be sold to certain types of investors with certain disclosures.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. So, I mean, it's hard to see any situation where people get made completely whole by any of these, and certainly any situation where they get made completely whole in assets that they were holding, right?
Yeah,
I mean, even the FTX deal, you say FTX is saying, listen, we'll give you 60, 70% in cash, but then you got to come to FTX and decide when to enter or exit the market and what to do again. It turns everybody into a trader.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. The only way we know of getting whole is what we did with Bitfinex, which is you take the haircut, you lock it in dollar values, and then you issue them with either debt or equity in order to have a speculative future upside. So with FTX, they get the entire upside of all these discounted assets. But if you do a bail-in, which I think is the last option here, then you can take the difference. You can give people equity in the upside, and then by accumulating all of these assets over a long term, like with Bitfinex, the equity value went from 30 cents to $16, paid out hundreds of millions in dividends, and also gave people a option on recovered hacked funds. So there is a way of getting it, but we're in this for the long term now. I don't expect anyone to receive any, if you're planning your finances in Celsius, please prepare for not receiving anything this year. But I do believe that there will be some left over that will be, settled. The challenge is the way that they're setting up the crypto long is I think the lawyers are setting this up so that everybody settles, reducing their legal liabilities. And we want to ensure that in that 120-day exclusivity period where only Celsius is allowed to propose solutions, that better solutions can be proposed.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think that the longer any of these drag on, which was, part of SBF's point when he was talking about Voyager in his thread, is that this is expensive, right? I mean, he even viewed in the next month before the auction, he sort of proposed the idea that it could be 9 figures in, attorney's fees and such just to go through this process for one of these platforms. So you're talking about obviously that money coming out of, yours and mine's pocket whenever we do get made whole or whatever percentage we get back as well.
Yeah, I mean, Celsius is a ginormous cash burn right now. It's got an unprofitable mining business. It's got really large salaries that are being disclosed at the board level. It's got a lot of employees the longer that goes for. And remember, the big winners is the people negotiating this deal, the lawyers, they get paid more the longer this goes on for, because it comes out of the the assets that are left on the balance sheet.
Yeah, absolutely a shit show, man. Sorry to pardon my French, but it's really. I would love to see more insight and things improving right now, and it just seems like the news keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Honestly, so I don't know. It's hard to imagine how this all plays out or when, but it's nice to know. I think for Voyager, at least, there is some hope if they go to auction and somebody views the business as viable moving forward, that people could see more than they probably could from Celsius. But that's maybe my wishful thinking or my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are pushing for good news. I want people to know that this is bad. I don't want to give them hopium unnecessarily, and I don't want to give them misinformation. This is a shit situation, but we have been in these situations in the past, and not saying it will happen again, but we did turn it into an incredibly good investment opportunity. And we would like to replicate that, and we're putting together all the moving parts right now in order to do that. So we're going to be making several more press releases and announcements over the coming weeks. The team have just been around the clock trying to put together all the moving parts that allow that to happen in a very regulatory scrutinized environment. So we do expect to be announcing some news that give people hope for those that are really victims of distressed lenders at the moment.
So, by the way, I can't confirm that this is true or not, but a few people have mentioned in the comments that the committee was just appointed a few minutes ago.
Oh,
so
right.
While,
okay.
Apparently, while we've been talking, that committee has been appointed. I've seen it from 3 different people in the comments. So maybe at least that's a decent step forward here.
Great. Yeah. And that's the next move. We need the committee to be formed so that we can start moving forward and putting together timelines and getting some things signed off and put past the people that are able to decide whether these things are good or bad.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time once again to come out and discuss this. I know that there's a lot of things you'd rather be doing in your life, as would I, honestly, than talking this to death. But, it's important that we at least try to sort through the facts and fiction and figure out what's going on in this process. So thank you once again.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. And as I get more updates, I'll let you know.
Yeah, and by the way, it says right here, breaking committee of unsecured creditors picked. Looks like 7 people. Simon, not one of them. I don't know if you were trying to be on the committee or whatever, but that's what it's saying here. I didn't see that. So there you go. Thanks, Simon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.